Hey, and we're live. Awesome. All right. So anyone watching this afterwards, we do live streams. It's kind of like a live Q&A where we dive into a topic. We do that every Friday. Join us. I'll usually post it a bit early. But today, we are going to be going over the worst parts of being a software engineer. And I am actually really excited about this one because software engineering is glamorized way too often. It's a very, it's a very accessible field, but it's also a very hard field to get into. But I just want to make sure people fully understand what they're getting into when they decide that they want to be a software engineer. For example, if you become a software engineer, fully expect that you're going to fix at least 3 devices during every family get together. Doesn't matter if you're tired. Doesn't matter if you're drunk. If you're of legal age, but expect to be fixing everyone's devices. And you might say, Don, that's just silly. I don't care about that. Just wait. But no, we have some more serious things, more serious complaints and frustrations with being a software engineer that I'm going to go ahead and cover. So I actually have a couple lists, and I'm just going to keep pulling them. We'll start a bit lighter with this, so we don't chase too many people off from the field. This one's good. I think I can pop it up as a caption. Let's see. Captions. Okay, so let me go ahead and delete these old captions. Live Q&A. All right, and we are going to go ahead. This is good. And pull up our first complaint. Okay, there we go. I think I figured it out. Cool. Here we go. Stand-ups. So I really like this one because I think well, let's talk about it. So when you hear yesterday I worked on stuff, today I will continue to work on stuff. That's all too familiar. So I remember at first, when I first became a software engineer, I thought stand-ups were the most amazing thing. I'd come in, they'd be bright and early. I'd have tons of energy, maybe a coffee. But no, when I first became a software engineer, I didn't need coffee. I had passion, right? And so I would go to this stand-up and I'd be surrounded by other software engineers and I'd be so proud to be here. And hey, Andrew, how you doing? And I remember just hearing about all these other smart software engineers talk about these things that they're going to be doing for the day, what they did yesterday. And I'm like, this is really cool. I am so excited to be part of this. And it was really cool. And it is really cool. And then, a month went by and I started being able to pitch in probably within a week. Within a week, I pushed out my first code change to production. And I was really proud of myself, and I'm sure that was very obvious in the stand-ups, and people were excited for me. And I think a lot of teams like bringing in new software engineers that are excited because they get others excited. And then a month passed, and we did the same thing. I mentioned what I was doing yesterday and what I was doing today. And then a few months passed, and crunch time started to hit, and I started learning about when the company was really trying to push a product through, and a lot of it was on the software engineers to complete that. And if you didn't complete it, you held up a lot of people. And so I remember the time crunch that I was in, and then remembering 9:30 a.m. on the dot every morning, crap, I got to do this meeting. And I'm literally in the zone. I got at the office really early. I'm in the zone and I started working on my project and I'm making progress, and boom, calendar event goes off, 10 minutes. I'm going to have to pull out of that because it takes forever to get back in the zone sometimes. And I remember, oh, great, another stand-up. And then multiply that by multiple years, several different positions. You just want to get work done. You don't really care about showing it off. Like you don't. It's not the same feeling. You feel really good about your position and what you're doing, but the stand-ups, it's just like it pulls you out of the zone. You're pretty much repeating the same stuff over and over and over. And I feel like a lot of people start feeling like stand-ups start interfering with their productivity. And the stand-ups are really good for like bringing up blockers and seeing if other developers have worked on this part of the code base. Like it's really good for that kind of conversation. But when you're just like saying, I did this yesterday, I did this today, even though you could see it, in the, what did we use? What tools did we use? It's GitHub's tool. It's like some project. It's some Scrum board thing. I forgot what GitHub used by default, but I remember just like, I don't know. It started to become a nuisance. And so I think like when you see like yesterday I worked on stuff and today I will be continuing to work on stuff, like you're just like a robot repeating this over and over with each stand-up. And so I kind of get where this person's coming from, and it's kind of funny. Hey, Hologram, welcome back. How you doing? Our stand-ups an everyday thing? Yeah, they're an everyday thing. And so typically it's just people on your team, people that need that context of what you're doing. Like, for example, sometimes we'd pull in a designer, sometimes we'd pull in UX or product, especially if they were really interested with the developer's progress. Because I remember, man, our product manager never entered the stand-up with us. And then I remember me really trying to push out my code that this product manager wanted. And he really wanted to go out as soon as possible. I think is a little unrealistic about the expectations. And that was a conversation that came up later and it all got sorted out. But then he specifically like went to the stand-up just to see how I was doing, instead of just like, well, maybe that's probably a little bit healthier. Never mind. That story doesn't make much sense. He did the right thing by getting the progress there. You don't want a product manager that's like pinging you constantly. But sometimes like in stand-up, you can also be a little bit nervous when like you are kind of getting stuck. And I think like when you do feel like you're getting blocked, I think the best thing you can do at a stand-up is just kind of like be upfront and honest about where your blockers are and what you're trying to push through. And, sometimes it's just natural, but sometimes other developers can just be like, oh, why aren't you using this other library we built for this? No wonder it's taking you this long, or it's taking you like a few days longer. And I think stand-ups are really good for that. But, there are just several months where sometimes you're just repeating it like a robot, and then you go back to work and try to get in the zone again. So, but stand-ups are usually an everyday thing. Jira is what I used for the first company. I was trying to think is it GitHub projects? Yeah, because we used Jira for the first company, little Jira for the second company. And then, I thought it was GitHub projects. I don't know. But welcome, Andrew. All right. So I guess like that's not really even a bad thing. I think a lot of people like stand-ups, but you start getting the vibe that like stand-ups are kind of interrupting someone's flow and interrupting someone's productivity when it's crunch time. And that's when you start, you're like, do we really need to meet every day? I said I was going to get this done. Like this is a few week project, maybe like once a week. Can I update you then? I don't know. Maybe everyone has different feelings about stand-ups, but sometimes they are productivity killers, especially when they last forever. And like I've had managers that would just purposely like cap stand-ups at like 15 minutes just because people were talking so much during them, where like the other people didn't need to know all of that. They had no attachment to what the other person was building. Yeah. That's something I really felt in my bootcamp stand-ups. It felt really bad when everyone was sharing all their progress and I'm still working on the same thing 2 days in a row. Yeah, and that's a feeling that's it took me a while to get over that too. I don't think I ever fully did, to be honest, Andrew. It takes, you just like have to understand people aren't there to judge you. They're there to listen to see if they can help you. And I think once you start adapting that perspective, you start looking at, even if you've been working on something for a long time, like what you're going to find is most managers kind of expect junior engineers to come in and take too long. And then we go over like, well, why did it take you too long? Standard code base, not reuse part of our code base? Are you not familiar with this library? And it really isn't a big deal. It's just like seeing you progress and seeing if you're on the right route and you're progressing at a good rate. And if you're not, like, okay, how can we help you, get on track or be able to retain a lot of what you're learning or figure this stuff out in a more pragmatic manner? A lot of it is just like people wanting to be there to help you out. But me, being self-critical, I'm like, I don't have much to show, don't have much to say. So I would also feel a little embarrassed at times, but the stand-ups are meant to be a really good thing. But like I said, they can be productivity killers if you don't cap them at a time limit. All right, what else? There's some silly stuff I want to go through, and then we'll probably get to more serious stuff. Hey, P. Sawyer. I'm just learning JavaScript. Do things like React and JS libraries make it easier? No, they make it harder. Get very comfortable with vanilla JavaScript. Don't bring in any libraries. Get very comfortable with the fundamentals of JavaScript first. And then those libraries, you'll be able to pick them up a lot easier. Hold on. Okay. So there's some stuff. Okay, this is actually good. Let me copy and paste this. This is pretty good. I don't know if I experienced this or not, because I don't know what project managers were saying, if they claim this at all. Hold on. I'll have to copy and paste this. I don't think this is a thing I really experienced much, unless they did just take all the credit. I built out, so project managers basically taking credit for what the developers are doing. I'm pretty sure that's a thing, and I've heard stories before. And I've also seen project managers. So I have a story about a project manager that I'll actually share. Learning React now, I miss the good old days. Once you learn React, you're going to like it. Give it time. React's tricky. React's very marketable, but especially compared to Vue, React is a little bit more robust, and it's not an incredibly easy thing to learn. You have to give yourself patience with that. If you're just focused on React for like 2 weeks straight, it's probably going to take you about 2 weeks to get a fundamental understanding of React and kind of like working knowledge for it. 2 weeks is kind of a long time to spend on a library to get working knowledge over it. So give yourself time. I think people are too hard on themselves with React. There's a huge difference between a good product manager and a bad product manager. I've had a situation in which I've had a bad experience, and I've also had a situation in which I've given a product manager a bad experience. And all of that could be solved through communication. So I'm going to give you 2 stories. The first one was at my first company, which is long gone now. They got bought out a long time ago. Everyone pretty much laid off, or most people. I don't even know if like the rest of the people are still working there. But anyways, it was a really good experience for a first company. And I remember when they laid everyone off, but me, and as far as like the front end team. And I remember having to pick up WordPress. Like I was very comfortable with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then all of a sudden they wanted a WordPress site, and they wanted me to have working knowledge of PHP and how WordPress worked. And, that's fine. I don't think it's an incredibly hard thing to pick up, but it does take time. And so I had a product manager. I remember I was delivering this like e-commerce portion of this website, and I couldn't figure out it was either how to hook up like this e-commerce with the authentication or with like the email reminders. I forgot what it was, but I took a little bit longer on that. And I remember I met with the designer. She was giving me new designs for another website I was working on the, at the same time. And I remember like this message popping up on her laptop that said, it was like the product manager, he was just like blown up. I forgot what it said. It said something like, I cannot believe, and it was like in all caps, that this this e-commerce page is taking this effing long. And I remember seeing that. I'm like, it just like put a sour taste in my mouth. And it was me trying to like figure out WordPress at the same time. And so I think like a product manager that doesn't communicate and like ask why, like even like join Standups and ask why certain things are taking a certain amount of time, because there were a lot of blockers with that WordPress integration, but that he probably didn't know about. And then when you just jump to conclusions like that, you blame the developers. It's like it creates a sour taste in people's mouth overall across the entire team. I think he could have just reached out and communicated. And I guess I could have like, I felt like I was updating every time in the notes, but like if you hear an update from a developer, if you hear an update from UX, design, product, anyone, and you're like, why is this taking so long? Like, just ask. Like, get that out, because when you let stuff build up on a developer team or on a tech team, it just comes out in really nasty ways. And sometimes you're going to see that. Yeah. My second story, though, was I was working at Albert. And I remember, I'm not going to say the name, but the product manager, I remember, so I remember working in a feature where I had all of the requirements, and this is kind of a common thing that you have to push back on and hold people accountable to, where like there was another team that tried to change the requirements, or they said, no, that's not the requirements they're supposed to be following. And so that got switched mid work on that feature. And so then I started, okay, I'm going to have to redo some parts. And I started changing things. And it's like, no, actually. And then I heard from other people, it's like, it's supposed to be this feature. It's supposed to look like this. And it's like, son of a, and so I remember like, okay, I'm going to change it again. I got to rewrite like half of the feature I already built, but I'm going to change it again. I remember the product manager being frustrated with me, and it came off like that. And I remember talking with her in an office about it. And I was very frustrated. She was very frustrated, but literally like it could have been a much shorter conversation for me to just communicate all these different requirements that were coming in. And this is just a lesson in general that I learned. Communicate very early. When you see requirements ever changing, and especially when you're mid-feature, push back on that and ask and be very clear, like, okay, I'm going to have to redo like 3/4 of this project or this feature right now. Like, this is how long it's going to take. And the best thing that you can do, and don't be shy to do this, stand up for yourself. Say, like, if people are giving you unrealistic expectations, like, be very clear and upfront about that. And you don't say like, no, that's too much. And this, I can't do that. You don't say I can't do that. I say, okay, it sounds like you're trying to change some of the requirements mid-feature. This is how long it's going to extend this work into. Right. This is just reality. So do you really want me to move forward with this? And I think giving like product and non-developers this context of like what they're really asking for. And sometimes you have to say like, this is why, this, and this is why this is going to take like a week longer. That's a skill that you have to build up and you have to be very clear about. So that's a really hard skill for junior developers to master. And I think a lot of it is because of imposter syndrome. But if you can get that down, you're going to have a really good time with tech teams. There's a lot of communication, like a lot of frustrating communication that like you end up just like being able to smooth over as you get more experience as a developer and you learn what to say and who to say it to. It's kind of learning company politics a bit on like software engineering teams. But it can I've seen that. I'm actually elaborating on this because I've seen this drive developers insane, where they will just flat out quit the company because they are so unhappy with how a feature went with all the communication with product design. So you have to speak up. So I can make a really bad experience or can make a really good experience. So many components, I lose track of where. React can definitely be a little bit tricky. That's why I like a feature-driven React. Oh, hold on. I think we got a bot. Oh. Now I'm figuring out the moderation. Does it actually chat? Oh, it doesn't. How do you? Oh, it takes a while for the moderation to apply. Okay, cool. We're learning something new about YouTube. All right, cool. That's cool. Restream does have moderation features. That's good to know. But yeah, as far as React, that's why I really like a feature-driven approach, where like a lot of people will separate files by type. So they'll have like a components folder, and then they might have like even just a Redux folder with the reducers and everything. And they'll kind of split all of that up, where I like saying like, I'll start off with the base folder of just, this is my app, and then like navigation. And I'll basically go by like different components on the page, navigation, gallery. I'm thinking about like how I'm going to do my website. It's going to be like navigation, gallery, footer. That's like the simplest part of my page, and I'm going to add more content from there. But like in the gallery view, then like that'll contain folders. So the gallery view, for example, like it'll have navigation, gallery, footer. You could say like header, gallery, footer. I don't know how I'm going to title it. But in the header, that's going to be a separate folder with a header React file. And then I'm going to have, if I need to add any tests to that specific component, I add them within that folder, no higher, no lower. And then let's say my header contains like 2 different types of navigation, and I somehow split that into 2 different components. I don't think I would do it this way. Maybe it's a bad example, but like then those 2 navigational components that might be swapped out, based on what the user is using to view that. Then like each folder would have a React file for that, and it just kind of goes, it kind of like splits off into that hierarchy where each folder contains everything it needs to be able to kind of like run that component, run that modular piece of the application. And so that's where like, oh man, my pen leaked. Can I not say the word leaked ink all over my hand. But that's where like you can start getting a little bit more comfortable with like lifting state up, and how far do you lift it up? You lift it up as far as you need to for, that maybe like you're lifting state up. So like a user, for example, will like trigger something, click a button, and it needs to update state for that component that encompasses the smaller component. So you lift that state up to the containing component because because another subcomponent needs that state. And so when you have like this feature-driven hierarchy, it's also easier to track like where you should lift that state up, and usually what components have access to that state and what potentially need that state. I'm a big fan of feature-driven design with React applications. All right, so what else? There were some really good ones. I'm trying to find it. Oh man, there's some actually really good ones. So here's like the number one thing that will push people out of companies. I wouldn't say the number one thing, but this is definitely something that frustrates a lot of people. The impossible deadline. This is very common on software engineering teams. And I think a lot of people have really good intentions. They want to help out the company. They want to do a good job. They want to look good. They want a promotion. They want a lot of things. But very often, most people have good intentions and they put their effort into their features. Now, I think like a good manager, a good CTO, good VP of engineering, or lead engineer, whoever your boss is, one of their positions is to shield you from business requiring too much of you, from burning out. And that doesn't always happen, unfortunately. I've been lucky enough to have good managers that have cheered for me and have shielded me from all of that crap. Um, so deadlines is something a lot of software engineers are overworked, and sometimes it's just a challenge. They want to complete that feature by a deadline. And you even have software engineers that have this stance like, okay, I put this on my runway for 2 weeks. I'm going to complete this in 2 weeks. And if I don't get it done by then, like, that's my problem. Even if blockers come up that you didn't expect, like, you have software engineers that like try to spread this mentality, like, I need to work 80 hours this week, even though these blockers came up, because I committed to 2 weeks. And I don't think that's a healthy mindset to have. I think a healthier mindset that will keep you at a company longer and make you more productive in the long run is saying, listen, like, I did not expect these big blockers. And so that's why, like, you have these tickets called discoverables, or not discoverables, but they're basically an opportunity for you to prototype or tackle the hardest critical piece of the feature that you're building and just solve the hardest problem and validate that you can solve that it's solvable within this time frame. And if you can't solve that, then you either need to extend that time or choose a different route or be a little bit more efficient with the libraries you pick. So it's a really tricky thing to navigate and juggle, but a healthy team, if you are not sure about how long it's going to take, will allow you to tackle that hardest problem. I'm trying to think of what we used to call them. They were tickets with like no scope, or like a very high scope, and they were just for you to explore. They were for you to like explore a library to be able to solve this feature, explore like the hardest, try to prototype like the hardest, or solve the hardest problem about the feature. I don't remember the exact name of them, but if you feel like you are having to spend weekends, if you feel like you are having to spend late nights trying to get this feature out because of a deadline, that's like, sometimes you just have a rough deadline. For example, like, at one of my companies, we had to deliver something to a customer where, like, to prevent layoffs, to specifically prevent layoffs, like, we had to get these features out. And that's a big deal. And sometimes they're going to have a crunch time like that with software engineering teams. And, sometimes you just gotta, you don't have to, but in my opinion, like, see what extra hours you can put in to be able to deliver that. Now, if a company's doing that all of the time, that's a problem. So that's a different situation, but you should always stand up to unrealistic expectations, unrealistic timelines. If you estimate your timeline, then communicate as early as possible about that. Because sometimes they'll even ditch a feature entirely and have you work on something else. And if you didn't speak up, you're like, I'm going to do my best to finish it as much as I can. And they have no idea that you're like 75% of the way there when you should be like 100% of the way there tomorrow. And there's no way you're going to finish that feature. That's a big problem. So communicate as early as possible, because I see a lot of people just burn themselves out with stuff like that. Hey, Martin, proof of concept. Proof of concept is a good term to do it. Do you can you think of the term like, so like a ticket that allows you to explore a library, a ticket that allows you to kind of like explore the code base to see, man, I'm not even describing it well. I can't think of the name we used for the ticket. It's been a while. That's all right. That's irrelevant. But I think like the main message is, if you're constantly going over hours, if you don't have a healthy work-life balance and you have unrealistic deadlines over and over and over, I think most of that is probably you not standing up for your own time and you not estimating well, and you need to get better with that. You could talk to your manager about that, because I think most people just they say, oh, I could finish it in like a week when it's going to take 2 weeks, because they're trying to do a good job and look good for the company. I think that's the biggest mistake you can make. It burns so many software engineers out. Spike, that's what it is. So Spike for research, and then proof of concept for trying to solve like usually tackle like the hardest issue that you're like, should we go down this route with it? Should we use this library? Is this possible in a short, like at least like an as close of a timeline as possible with what they're hoping for? Yep. Spike is what I'm thinking of. Thank you. All right. What are some of the hardest things that that you've encountered with software engineering? Or being a software engineer, or even learning software engineering? These are some interesting ones. No, that's a little bit different. Here, we'll, there are a few here. Kind of a few silly ones. So I think I'm kind of like, maybe I'm just squashing some of these. The code is poorly written. Code bases aren't perfect. A lot of times you're going in, and especially in the beginning, and refactoring code. There's a lot of code that needs to be refactored. There's a lot of technical debt that companies usually account for. The worst thing you can do is go into old code and just complain about how it was written. Maybe even make a few comments about the developer. Like that's one of the worst attitudes that you can have with it. I see to me, refactoring is really fun to clean code up. It's like, it just makes me feel good. It's like being efficient with your time. It's like cleaning your house, your apartment. It just like, I think a lot of developers really appreciate the making something more efficient. It just feels good. And so hopefully people are going into their into the refactoring with like a positive mindset and like really excited to clean it up and make it better. Because refactoring can be fun. And for some reason, I've heard of some software engineers just not a big fan of that. But sometimes it's just like dealing with, spaghetti code and trying to work with it because you don't have enough time to refactor it. And then you get like scope creep of like, sometimes it even makes sense to like refactor the code and add that to your timeline because it just isn't doing what you need it to do. It's just all a balancing act. But the worst thing you can do is just like, man, just talk bad about the software engineer that wrote it, or just complain all the time. Like, you don't want to be that software engineer that's just constantly complaining about other software engineers and the way they write code. And if they just did it your way, everything would be great and the code base would be so clean. Like I've worked with software engineers like that. No one wants to work with them. Trying to constantly increase productivity can be extremely draining. Absolutely. I agree with that. And I think like, a lot of it is just communicate. I mean, it's just communicating. A lot of issues aren't really like because you're not productive enough. It's just like a lack of communication from software engineers. And that I can vouch for. A lot of software engineers are really bad at communicating as often as they should be. You got to keep in mind, like, compared to tech teams like design, product, they're constantly communicating. And when a software engineer kind of just sits alone at their computer and a blocker comes up, and a lot of you don't realize how many software engineers do not communicate this kind of stuff that other people really need to know. The business side of things really need to know. Software engineers are notoriously bad at that. That's a skill that you have to build up. I break things every time I refactor my old code. Oh no. Well, to me, that's kind of fun. I mean, it just makes you, I don't know, every time you have to debug something, it's like, it's another opportunity to get better at what you're doing. When you, like, if you just write this happy, clean code and it's perfect, that doesn't really challenge you. You don't really learn much from that. When you have to debug something, that's like an opportunity to grow. It sounds kind of cheesy, but like, that's exactly what it is. It's an opportunity for you to grow. And when you start looking at it like that, like these long bugs that like you spend all night on, and then it finally clicks in the morning and stuff, those aha moments, like all that, it just like clicks and solidifies things even more, and it reinforces it because you had to really think about it in a complex way and try to solve it. Like, you should be thankful for bugs. Doesn't mean to go out and like push as many bugs as possible into your applications, but when you do encounter them, they're a good thing. I guess I can pull some of these up. I probably should be doing that. Reviews are often a big pain point for me. PRs taking too that vague or unclear feedback, or suggestions out of scope of the feature. Those are all really good points. So code reviews taking too long to be looked at, like, so I can say for certain that a lot of managers have to stay on top of that. But it really is up to the developer to ping the team again. It's not like they don't care about what you're doing. It's just sometimes people are in crunch time. Sometimes people, they have their other requirements, and we're all human, and we're all trying to be as productive as possible for the most part. And, sometimes you just have to remind people. If that's constantly a problem, that's something to bring up in your review with when you kind of review the feature that you just built, and mention like this was a big, because usually your manager is, man, I've been out of coding out of my team for so long since I started my company. I'm trying to like remember all these terms, but the retro, like when you have your retro over your feature and you talk about like all these things that happen, all these things that slowed it down, like the retro is a really good time and it'll be documented. It's a really good time to bring it up. Like, this feature like could have been pushed out days ago if it would have just gotten reviewed sooner. And like, you can say like, I understand people have the requirements, and maybe I need to account for this in the future. What do you guys think about that? So yeah, that's definitely a thing. And vague or unclear feedback. Yeah, I've gotten all sorts of feedback. And I would actually say my first manager was almost too nice to like be very critical of my code. Where like my code at my second position got ripped apart, like so many comments on my code, and people were very specific about it, and I loved it. Like, I needed to grow like that. But I've definitely talked to many software engineers that feel like they're not getting good feedback on the PR, and they don't even care about like people following conventions or being more efficient or more readable. Some people will literally just check things off because it works. They'll test it, see if it works. Some people don't even test it. Some people just look at the code. They won't pull the code. They won't test it. Every company does it a little bit differently. But one of the most frustrating things you can have, and honestly, this is kind of a red flag for junior software engineers that need this feedback to grow. Like, you want a company that's very critical in code reviews. And you'll get used to it. You'll get used to getting the feedback, but you want people to be critical of your code, and not just to pick it apart based on like their conventions, and you're not following their conventions. But like, if you're not following the team's conventions, then you can bring up a conventional argument. But sometimes it's just like, introducing new ways of doing it. But if it's working, you can keep it. I've gotten feedback like that, which is really helpful. Like, sometimes I'm like, that's kind of your opinion, your convention, or it's like, that's way better than what I'm doing. Like, I want to adopt this. And then I would take that feedback, even though it was a conventional piece of feedback, where sometimes people think that's kind of petty. Like, then I would bring that into all of my features. And I'm a better developer for it. So yeah, but the more feedback, the better usually, but it needs to be relevant. And suggestions out of scope of the feature. Yeah, I haven't really dealt with a lot of that. It's usually, I guess I've reminded people like, that's not in scope. And then like, we're actually going to account for this in a later feature or down the road. That's a thing. But sometimes you just have to remind people of that. It's a good point though. I like it. All right. So I kind of just want to bring up this document. Not on the right computer for this though. I'm going to bring up a few. So this is a good one. I'm going to bring up this. Let's save this. So managers want me to sacrifice code quality for development speed is something we're going to talk about in a second. Man, there was this one page that I found that had like really good red flags for software engineers. We'll bring this up and I'll see if I can find it. So a lot of it, this is a really interesting conversation because you get preaching about this topic. And a lot of software developers that, this is going to be a good topic. So you get a lot of software developers, I don't know if I would say a lot, but you get people that would mention that you need to push back so you can write quality code and you can write tests and make it work for every single browser. And so like you have this balancing act of trying to serve majority of your users and push out quality code and have it you want time to test the code yourself before it reaches QA. You should not lean on QA finding bugs. At the very least, like if your code doesn't even work, I've heard QA horror stories where they would get delivered code where the happy path of even just trying to use the feature, like the simplest part of the feature, like it doesn't even work. It's flat out broken, and developers will push this code up, broken code where they didn't even test it. They just wrote it and pushed it out. That's a thing. But as far as, I think people need to understand, you wouldn't have a job if you didn't satisfy the business's customers. You wouldn't have a job if you didn't push out features that made the company money. And this idea, some people will push like you need to write so many different tests for your application. I want unit tests for every single feature you put. I want like 95 to 100% test coverage on everything. And you have people that are very hardcore about this because they probably came from a mindset or they were trained to do this. One thing you have to understand is when you join a new company, it's important to understand what they prioritize. And if, for front-end developers specifically, we could talk about compatibility. If you are trying to support IE8, I don't even know a developer that's insane enough to do this. So, but I'm just going to use this as an example. If you try to support IE8 when, your company is completely like on their website, they don't even support IE at all anymore. And you say, well, and you try to argue this progressive experience that you want to deliver to the customer, and it's important for us to do this. And when you're like siloed and focused on you, like delivering, like this abstract benchmark of quality that you've determined, I think some developers kind of need to take a step back and get a more realistic expectation of what the business is trying to deliver. So this often comes up with accessibility, right? So especially with startups, when you work at a startup as a software engineer, you're going to realize very often you're going to sacrifice some quality and you need to push that code out. It is much better to get that feature out and get feedback on that feature than for it to be delivered perfectly sometimes. And some software engineers, like when they think about it, they like curl up into a little ball and they cringe and they're like, how dare you? How could we not push out this quality feature? How dare we not focus on making this accessible to every single person, even that one end user that's completely blind and deaf, and like we need to serve every single customer. And I can understand from them being empathetic with the users, but like when you have this like very abstract scenario and you're trying to serve this like one particular user, but the company's going to lose $50,000 if you don't deliver this feature on this date, it's like you have a balancing act that you have to do. And I think sometimes you need to put some of these expectations that you have for yourself and your code aside and just be upfront about like this, this might have a couple of bugs in it. That's a really hard thing to say. It's like, this is a really unrealistic deadline. The bugs are extremely minor. They're not functional. This works, really well. But like, on this one particular browser, I just could not get it to like position this element at this pixel location. And so I think too many software engineers have these like high ideals when they completely forget about the business requirements. And so it's one thing to be upfront about, like, there's going to be technical debt about this and you need to be clear and communicate that. But you usually get this with arguments of accessibility and conventions, and like sometimes a feature just needs to be released so the startup doesn't go under and, people don't get fired. That's like a really hard thing. That's one thing I noticed with a lot of software engineers that have a really hard time grasping this very fast pace. You always want to push for quality, but if you're willing to if you're willing to die on that hill based on your specific accessibility standards, when you're going to cost a company, tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's like, you're probably not going to be at that company for very long. That's a really hard conversation to have, because you have a lot of software engineers that are very passionate about certain topics. And so now if your company is has tons of high quality standards, it's incredibly important that you, push yourself to that. And you could try to push a company to do better. You can try to talk with your manager and talk with the team to explain why it's important and why it's also going to be very efficient and important for the business in the long run. But a lot of software engineers just they kind of virtue signal about we need to do this. Okay, why do we need to do this? And they don't really understand how it's going to better satisfy the customer. And I think software engineers need to do a good job of communicating that, because that's when you can up the team standards. That's when you can up the team's expectations of themselves. But, a lot of people, when you have managers that want you to sacrifice code quality, it's I think you need to get a better understanding of what's been happening for the past 5 years of the business before you virtue signal of what needs to happen and you start telling your manager what needs to happen. That's kind of a controversial opinion, though. I like that's my stance on the opinion, but I'm also very adaptable to I try to figure out what the company's priorities are, because I know I can write really good code if I have the time. I know I can, but I also know where to skip out on tests. And I know what really should be tested. Do we really need to test this dummy React component that does very little and write unit tests for it? Probably not. Do we really need to make this accessible for Internet Explorer IE8? Probably not. I think people get stuck too much on my code has to be perfect or I'm not going to be proud of myself. And it's I think people need to put their egos aside a little bit and just understand the business requirements. We need our app to be worthy of God is a really good way to describe that. And I guarantee you, me saying this out loud and people hearing it, people are going to get so pissed at this. I promise you, this is actually a controversial opinion. People are going to get mad at me saying this, and I don't really care. But yeah, when you've been at a few companies and you've seen different companies do it in a different way, I think people need to be more open to seeing how different tech teams work and understand the pros and the cons of that. Because one day you might be running your own software engineering team, and you're all these traits that you're getting from your managers and other software engineers, you're going to pick away the qualities that you think aren't great. You don't want them in your software engineers, and you're going to get qualities where wow, that really motivated our team, or that our team was so productive because of this, and our team communicated so well and we worked so well together because of this. And I would actually start making a list of what your priorities are, because if you go into the next position, you get your next software engineering position, when you're interviewing, knowing the priorities of what you really care about can help you not go into a company that's just going to frustrate you. So if you care about 100% accessibility and writing unit tests for everything, and these are your priorities, this is what you consider quality code, and you want to be proud of this, don't join a company that doesn't meet your standards. So that I think that's my feedback for that. But this is actually a really good one. I thought this was going to be a simple one. Let's see what else. Boom, boom, boom. If only I could find that one. There's one article. Oh, okay. This is good. I'm actually going to write my own caption for this. Oops. I meant to put must in there. Screw it. You must eat, drink, and dream about code. You must be incredibly passionate about code, or are you really the right person for our team? I used to, when I would talk to junior software engineers, I used to teach them that what they had to sell was passion, which is true, but I think passion was the wrong word. When we hear that junior engineers to stand out and finally get that first position, you have to be the most passionate developer ever. You have to wake up and you don't even need coffee. All you do is have this mantra in your head, like, I am going to be the best coder of today. I'm going to be the best programmer I ever was, even better than yesterday, even better than last week. Like, I am just going to eat, drink, and dream about code, and I'm just going to be the best software engineer ever, and I'm going to have unlimited energy for this field. So that's what's often sold to us. And I think that pushes people away from the industry. And here's why. No one, absolutely no one has 100% motivation all the time to code. There were so many days where I went into my job not wanting to be there. I wanted to be out running. I wanted to be hanging out with friends. I wanted to spend time with family. I wanted to just stay at home and play video games that day. I did not want to work on my feature. And in fact, when crunch time hits and I keep hitting blockers, I'm going to work on that feature less and less and less every day. That's a reality of having any job. And this idea that you have to be 100% passionate about this or you don't deserve to be on a software engineering team is complete BS. If you have a company that like really hypes this up, be careful. Any good company that's going to treat you well, respect your time, not overwork you, is not going to want you to eat, drink, and dream about code. In fact, all of my managers, because I am someone that is very critical of myself and I'm not doing enough ever. And I would go into a position and I would get burned out and I would be like, oh my God, I'm getting burned out from this. I need to move faster. I need to do better. And all of my managers, like at one point or another, told me, Don, you need to take some vacation. Like you are getting into this way too much. I understand like you're studying at home and you're doing all this. Like this is just, like at the end of the day, it's just a job. And you sometimes have a family to support. You have events that happen and you need to understand that like this, you're in it for the long haul. If you want to be at a company for a long time and you want to have a healthy lifestyle and a work-life balance, you need to understand that like motivation is going to dip and you need to take advantage of when that motivation comes. And if you want, like put an extra hour or two a week into like whatever you're working on, if you're really excited about it, but you have to understand when to pull away. You have to understand that, it is just a job at the end of the day, right? Otherwise, you just be coding for fun. You just be building personal projects, which I highly recommend people do anyways. But, like you have to understand it's a job at the end of the day. And if you're not motivated to code, and this comes with a lot of junior engineers that aren't motivated to constantly learn, like, do you know how many times my motivation just dipped? Like I literally would go weeks with just like, I don't even want to code anything. I need a week and a half break from this. I'm going to go swimming. I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to spend time with family. Like motivation does not stay. And it comes I think motivation will come a little bit more often when you're kind to yourself and you kind of shift your perspective into getting excited for work. But that often comes with like pulling back and having a healthy mindset and a healthy work ethic. Because I used to like be obsessed with Gary Vee. Like you had to spill every, especially with entrepreneurship. I'm like this. I spend about 11 hours a day trying to build my thing up. But that's me. But in my opinion, like you just have to do that with a startup. You have to do that with entrepreneurship. But like coding, you don't need to do that. Work 40 hours in a week. Like learn a bunch of stuff. Be open to like communicating with your team and meeting people, building good relationships and learning as a developer and building better and better code. But like then go home and relax and work out or do whatever. Like you got to part from the company. So be careful about people that say you have to sell your passion. No, you have to want to build things. You have to want to solve problems. You have to want to you have to appreciate those aha moments that come up in your software engineering career. Be very careful about like having the benchmark be argued about this. And I think if more people did that, they would they would be more patient with themselves until they finally got that software engineering position. They wouldn't quit. I think passion is a really tricky word that people need to be careful of. What are your thoughts about that? Because I know like everyone sees like a lot of these positions like must be passionate about this. Usually passion in a startup world translates into like 60 hours at least of coding a week. Hey, Jim. I want to be a software engineer because it's a dream since I was young, and I want to do it to prove to myself. Prove to yourself what? That you can be a software engineer? Yeah, this is good. But Mr. Boss, I also enjoy doing things that aren't coding. Absolutely. I usually just write code in my free time when I have a cool project on my mind or I want to play around with some. That's healthy. That's exactly what I did. You know, it's a really weird thing where like in order to avoid burnout, I need to work 40 hours and no more at a job. I mean, I could work a little bit more, but like maybe at max 45 hours a week. And, but I also need to work on a personal project. I also need to play around with technologies at home. Like I also need to build something I want to build. If both of those things aren't happening, I'm going to burn out. That's me. So one of my priorities is a healthy work-life balance. So that's why I love startups, but I usually find startups that are a little bit more established, at least 100 employees. And one of my main questions is, like, what's the work-life balance? How, like, am I going to be on call? How often, am I really going to be spending past the 40 hours a week coding? I find it's a lot easier when you have a goal in mind, your free time, and you aren't coding every day just for the sake of coding. That's why I don't believe in 100 days of code. I don't think it's a good movement. I don't think it's a good program. You find that on Twitter, you find that on LinkedIn, Facebook, a lot of different social media platforms. So when I started the 30-day coding challenge, we're in the middle of it, by the way, and I'm actually really excited to see what people are building. But I specifically said, like, do not, like, I only want to see updates 5 days a week. 5 days a week. Take the weekend off. I don't believe in coding boot camps that have people code every Saturday and Sunday. I think it's unhealthy. I don't think people retain things really well. So, you can't just like code every day just to, I don't know. I don't think it's really healthy. I think you need breaks, and I think you need to, like you said, have a goal. Sometimes it's just like, I got to complete this course, and that's fine. That could be your goal. Sometimes it's like, I want to build out this small feature. Maybe I'll split it into a few days. Like, knowing what you're aiming for that day is really healthy, but you shouldn't just code just to code. But also, like, if you're trying to become a developer, you spending like 1 or 2 days a week, and you're brand new and you're trying to become a developer, you spend a few hours those days and that's it. If that's all you can do, that's fine. I would spread it out a little bit more than that, because you don't want to just cram it into 1 or 2 days. But still, like, you shouldn't just code just to code. Hey, is your name Empanada? Empanada. Welcome. How do you find startups? You can find them on tons of job postings. I'd be careful of like AngelList. You can find some good startups there, probably smaller startups, but sometimes you got to watch about some of their offers. I would actually check out Joshua Fluke's videos. He specifically, I think, has targeted AngelList and shown some kind of sketchy job postings on AngelList. People like just offering equity, and like, I think he even found one where like they wanted you to pay them for their internship. I think that's one of the most recent things I've seen. But AngelList is a really good one for small startups. Indeed's my main one. There are tons of job postings though. Hey, Foxy, how you doing? Hey, Ben. Welcome, welcome. Number one thing about being a software engineer, getting to meet and work with awesome people like Don. Appreciate that. If you haven't checked them out, we did a live stream a while ago. That was a lot of fun. We'll have to do that again. People liked you. Welcome, Ben. We've never worked professionally, though. You and I, Ben has helped me mentor at the meetup, and we've just been friends since. I enjoy talking to him, but I think I lost my place like I usually do. There's a question I want to bring up, or not a question. Oh, there it is. Thanks, Jim. I can't watch him anymore. His cutthroat methodologies of working 60 to 80 hours doesn't sit right with me. That's Gary Vee. So we were talking about Gary Vee. I follow Gary Vee. I was a huge fan of Gary Vee in the beginning. And I think it kind of motivated me to push forward a little bit, but I didn't really understand how inefficient I was being with my time. And sometimes you get this, like, when you get people that are like, well, how much do you really want it? You're spending time with your family. Like, usually good motivators they might kind of target like, well, how much time are you spending on Netflix a week? How much time are you spending on consuming content, not producing, consuming content on social media platforms? When you get people talking about that, like it gets you to re-examine like, well, how much time am I really wasting? Is this okay? Is this like helping me take a breath and like not be so obsessed with this? And like, do I need these breaks? Like, do I really need to spend 4 hours on Netflix, every weekday? Or can I trim it down to like maybe an hour a week? Maybe when I'm kind of like winding down or even eating dinner. So I think like a healthier mindset to have is like re-examining like, yeah, are you wasting time? But saying like, oh, you only work 8-hour days on whatever you're trying to do. You're not doing 12, 16 hours a day. You really think you need more than 8 hours of sleep? Like when you get people like that, which Gary Vee used to do, I think he's chilled out a little bit. I think people just burn out with that kind of advice. I don't think it's realistic. You can't really apply it. You have a degree, but never got into the industry yet. Okay. Oh, so I want to prove to myself. Okay, let me pull these up. So I want to prove to myself and my family that I can be a software engineer. So I'll keep driving at it until I make it happen. Jim, that's awesome. Hopefully you're going to like being a software engineer. Hopefully you're going to work at it or work as a software engineer once you finally get it. It's not just like, oh yeah, I became a software engineer and then quit like the next day. Hey, Nathan. I'm thinking about getting a web dev 6-month certification from a local community college. It would be free. Would you recommend still going down the self-taught route? I have no idea. It depends on your timeline, how soon you're trying to become a developer. I have no idea if the program's good. I have no idea. You can go down the self-taught route. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a look at the curriculum if it's free. Yeah. If you had the curriculum in front of you, like sometimes people will book like one-on-one paid sessions with me and we'll just dive into the curriculum to see if like it's really teaching you what you need to know. But yeah, that's as much as I can give you. Hey, Foxy, I think I said hey to you. Whew. I also want to get out of the food service industry where last week I worked 56 hours and I felt like there is so much more to life. I have a buddy that works at the mills in Northwest Indiana and he just like, he has a family, he has kids. He puts so many hours into just working his life away because there's money coming in. He's making like over $100,000. I understand if you're trying to make ends meet, like that's completely understandable. But when you're working like 80 hours a week to like just make over 100,000, so you could buy like tons of accessories that you'll probably never use in a year. Like, I don't know. I think that gave me, when I first broke that amount in Chicago, it gave me a really It kind of changed my priorities a bit because I think like my motivations for becoming a software engineer initially were somewhat financially motivated, and you realize at a certain point, I guess this is just me, everyone's different, but I realized at a certain point, like I was just upping my lifestyle. Like I didn't need all this stuff. I was just trying to make more money to buy more things. It's a really bad habit to build too. And I actually spent like the first year trying to destroy that habit with my company that I'm starting now. I think I'm going to start playing music in the background again. I like my synthwave, and I think other people like synthwave, right? Everyone likes synthwave. That's what I'm going to tell myself. Okay, sounds good, Ben. Yeah, we'll have to do, I'll invite you on another live stream. Um, bu- 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 Hey, Balin. In my last 4 weeks of a 24-week boot camp, really think I would enjoy a deep dive into a startup world. Where do I start? Where do you start and what? Like learning about what it's like to be at a startup or applying for startups, like finding startups to apply to? Can you clarify? Just seems like every entry-level job requires some sort of college education. A lot of them are going to list that. Remember, like every job posting is the ideal candidate. It's not, I'm telling you, even if they put required, I would still apply. Maybe some hiring managers are going to disagree with me, but ultimately, like they're going to hire the best candidate or what they think is the best candidate for the job. Just because you don't meet all the requirements does not mean you should not apply. It can be discouraging to see that. I understand that, Nathan. It can be very discouraging. But you apply anyways. You just like, that's why, in my opinion, it's kind of healthy to treat the job search process as a numbers game. When you kind of distance yourself from it, put it all on a spreadsheet and just look at the data, you stop, eventually you kind of stop caring as much when you don't get the job. At that entry level, it really is a numbers game. And a lot of it has nothing to do with you or you having a college education or not. It doesn't mean you can't get a job, not even close. It just, like I said, they're trying to hire the ideal candidate. You do not need a college education at all, even outside of software engineering, to become a software engineer. That's not a requirement. Hey, Foxy. Oh, you're talking about a GTA server. Oh, that's really cool. Hold on. Man, so my little secret, I said, I might be building up my developer community just so we have enough people where I can create a private RP GTA server. I think that'd be so much fun. Right? Wouldn't that be fun? I watch GTA live streams on Twitch. I don't know if that's sad or not. I find them really funny though. I want to make more money so I can save more money. That's a good mindset to have. If you're going to stow it away, hopefully, I mean, talk to an accountant, but hopefully you're not just putting it away. Putting it away in savings is still like a healthier thing to do than what most people are doing. I'm terrible at saving money. That is one of the number one habits I've been working on for so long. Is it true that you should go into development for the money? Nope. There's a conversation on LinkedIn where people said they got into it for the money, but I think that is the wrong reason. No. I think like simple answer is no. Most people won't even become software engineers with that motivation. You can go into it being excited about the money that you're going to be making. But if that's like your main reason, very often you're going to give up on that. It just requires getting into an entry-level position requires way more than the motivation. it's just going to require too much out of you. Like, there are easier jobs to get that are going to up your salary besides software engineering, in my opinion. People think just because you don't need a degree, like, oh, it's easy to become a software engineer. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. It's really difficult. I would just be careful about that motivation. Thanks, Foxy. I followed. All right. Thank you. Appreciate the follow. All right. So it was finding a startup to work at. Certain places in the country I should move to. Certain companies that help place people at startups new to the industry. Just look at Indeed. Look at job sites. That's your best bet. I wouldn't say there's any secret to it. I talked about AngelList. I think you're going to have to weed some companies out from AngelList, see if they're serious offers or not. But no, just look at job postings. That's it. Sometimes it helps to be at a big city. I think people have a little bit more flexibility because of the remote culture that's been built up during the pandemic. But yeah, you got to apply. But being willing to move once the pandemic is under control a little bit more, that's a big plus. But yeah, there's no like secret advice to that. Just look at job postings, and definitely consider like the closest big city next to you or like mid-sized city, and definitely apply for all the jobs there, all the jobs that relate to software engineering or whatever you're trying to do. And it's harder to get the attention of recruiters in the beginning. You just look up recruiting agencies for software engineers. All of this you just find on Google. I'm only 18. I'm in an AT&T call center. I'm just looking to find my way into career path or something that I think would really enjoy doing. Really appreciate your advice, new subscriber. Well, thanks, Nathan. Hope you find that. Yeah, it's a crazy amount of work. It takes a lot of time. And I think people are too hard on themselves. It takes a lot of time to get that first position. People need to be more patient with themselves. And more importantly, like, understand you're probably not going to get a job in 3 months. Even with the coding boot camp, it's going to take longer. So you need to budget that. Don't just quit your full-time job and expect to get a job as a software engineer within 6 months. We're in a pandemic. The economy is shot. And you have certain states where the policies, I'm not going to give my opinion on it, but they just shut down all business and you have a lot of homelessness. But like, it's, the economy is not in a good place right now. And it's being held up by very thin wires. So don't just quit your job expecting to get a software engineering position within 6 months. I would often say, like, if you're going to go to a tense program, I would give yourself up to a year, literally like a 3-month coding boot camp, and then give yourself 9 months to find that job. Like, give yourself money to be able to live off of, or just plan to like work part-time after you graduate a coding boot camp, or just don't quit your job at all and do a part-time program. What about pivoting from an industry to an entry-level job in tech? Do you think jobs such as QA specialist are also decent jobs, or is the developer the best route? It's whatever you want to do. So I think you need to establish like a base income that's acceptable to you. Everyone's going to like, some people are going to like QA more. Some people are going to like being a software engineer more. I wouldn't say there's a best job. They all just are different. But I think if you're going that general and you're being open to pretty much any position, I think you need to look specifically into the positions, because each of those are going to require a specific path, most likely, right? You can't just like learn a bunch of stuff, a year later apply to all these different positions usually you're not going to be able to stand out. So you have to look into these positions, look at YouTubers that like have done QA, that have done product, that have, like been developer advocates, that have been software engineers, and just get a feel for what their day to day is like. That's the best advice that I can give you. You gotta narrow down a bit if you want a chance at any of those. But all can be really good positions. Depends on what you want. Can you help me get into FSA? How do you propose that I do that, Jeff? Did you go through the interview process? What happened? What was your motivation when you started software development? I liked building communities. I remember building. I've always liked business, and I like building things that people used. Like it started when I was like 14. I built X Page, built a website for StarCraft. If anyone remembers StarCraft back in the day. And then I remember at 18, I wanted to start a web hosting company. I figured out how I can resell hosting services, and I wanted to see if I could build a business off of that. So I built a website for my web hosting business. And I've always built things that were solutions to the problem I was trying to beat. Like I always like building things. I like getting users behind something. I like building something that provided value to people, is like the most general way I can put it. It just gave me a good feeling. It was really cool to like see what made it grow and what made people attracted to like whatever I built and wanted to use it. And I just like, I think that's why I encourage people like to explore and figure out really things that get you excited to be a software engineer and work as a software engineer. Like you have to play around. You have to you just think about problems in your life and think about like how you can solve that through technology. And sometimes that doesn't mean like solve it through web development. Sometimes it means getting a bit lower level or just getting more comfortable with hardware and connecting things together and building robots. And like, I think you just got to try building something that sounds really fun and that might help you out or might help someone else out. Because then you can get feedback on that and iterate on it and grow with it. So that's why I really encourage people to play around with that kind of stuff. All right, got some more synthwave playing in the background for me. Why do I keep losing my voice? I feel like I don't live stream enough. I feel like my voice keeps going out so quickly. I've heard there are more tech jobs because of the pandemic and hiring has increased at companies. What do you think about that? I don't agree with that. I'd be really curious. Maybe I'm wrong. That doesn't sound right at all. That's not what I've seen. I think there are less positions available, especially at the entry level of a lot of tech. Every time, like the whole economy doesn't crash, right? There are some industries that will benefit a certain type of crisis in an economy and certain ones that'll just get destroyed over it. In every single like crash of the economy, it helps to know what industries rely on what and where they get their business. So take that into consideration. I don't think software engineer positions at the entry level have increased. What you're probably seeing is companies needing more experienced software engineers, but that's always been a problem. Companies have always desperately needed mid-level to senior engineer positions. But I think like what most people are worried about is like, well, can I get into the industry during this pandemic? And it's become harder. I don't want to like paint this picture. Oh yeah, the tech industry is booming. That's not true as a whole. So you're going to have certain industries that will have made more money from the pandemic and that have learned to thrive from like these hard times. And, all companies are trying to stay afloat, and companies that have learned to stay afloat, like they're companies that you should seriously consider working at, especially if they've increased the number of positions that they've opened up to. But it depends on what industry they're in. Because software engineering, you can go into any industry. There's so many different industries with software engineer positions and just tech positions in general, QA, product. Like there are a lot of openings opening up, but as a whole, like I don't think more positions have become available. I think it just depends on the industry that you're trying to get into as a software engineer. When are we getting OBS streams with music? I had them. I haven't had time to set it up completely. I want to bring that back. I'll probably do it next Friday. So, because I like the alerts that pop up. I like thanking people for subscribing and following and stuff like that. So soon, hopefully, because especially on Twitch, like Twitch doesn't really like this too. We could just chat. LinkedIn, we could just chat. It's more professional. Well, YouTube's not very professional with the live streams. I don't know. I'll bring it back probably next week. What do you think about New Camp? Let's bring it up. Their price is so low that any of their flaws I can compensate for economically and still be 90% below any other coding. I mean, that's the key to New Camp. It's low risk. I always say this with New Camp, and this is just what I've seen. You're going to need to supplement. I think New Camp is something that's going to get you like 90% of the way there, and I think that's a pretty good percentage. Your best bet to making the most out of New Camp is, in my opinion, get really comfortable with JavaScript fundamentals. That's what people say they wish they would have done. That's a lot of feedback that I've gotten from graduates. So, and you can watch one of my videos. We talked about that a bit, but for the price, I would highly consider it as long as you're willing to supplement. There are other coding boot camps that will take you much further, and they'll have like more established career services built in. It depends on like what your priorities are. If you're someone that's fairly independent and kind of like figure at least a little bit out, like if New Camp can get you 90% of the way there and you can get the rest of the way, you're confident with that, you're going to save tons of money. And it's a really good option. That's my personal opinion on New Camp. Oh, you've seen a lot of more senior positions? Yeah, that's just what I've seen. Do you suggest using a job tracker when applying for jobs? I started to apply for JS positions in Seattle, but I always get beat by the competition. I don't know if I should be doing more projects or how I can really convince an employer to hire me. Yes, so that's what my one-on-ones are for, because very often I get so many questions and I can empathize with them because they're just frustrated. They just want a job. But like I get these questions that I can't really answer unless I know exactly where you stand and what your resume looks like and what your projects look like. And let's dive into the code, and I can give you much better advice and get you pushed forward when I know a lot of this information. But I get a lot of questions that are like, what do I do? It's like, well, what do you want me to say? I don't know you. So usually questions like that, I don't respond to, but sometimes it just helps to talk with a mentor or just anyone. Like reach out to people for free on LinkedIn and just see if you can get a 10-minute conversation with a software engineer. But I highly recommend a job tracker. Really helpful. And it can help to know, like, very often, like you're not going to do company research for every single company and then like tailor the perfect cover letter, and like ideally you would do that, but you're a person that gets like you don't have 100% motivation all the time, and you get tired, and some days you just want to spam out applications, and I get it. And I think it's important to track the results that you're getting, because sometimes in some areas, maybe like you'll get hired by just applying directly on LinkedIn where you submitted no cover letter, and they could just directly look at your LinkedIn profile. Maybe you're getting more results on that. And you're getting at least like an HR call, and you need to track that. You need to figure out, like, look at your strategies, try different things and track it. But you need tons of data. You need to put in hundreds of applications to be able to get useful data out of that. But yeah, I highly recommend you track it. Flatiron, Lambda, and Dev Mountain are the top three. Top three where? Do cover letters matter? Yes, 100%. Way too many people give up on them. They 100% matter. They matter more. I would argue they matter more than your like a portfolio website, because you can showcase portfolio projects on your resume. You can list all that stuff. I would argue cover letters and understand, like showing, usually like I just recommend really short cover letters. God, if you're writing more than a page for a cover letter, that's ridiculous. Really short cover letters, it's just a few sentences in each paragraph. The first paragraph expressing like you really understand, like maybe like they posted an article and you got like, you're like, wow, they really care about accessibility. I love accessibility. And like sharing that, like you understand that that's like to make their technology accessible to everyone in the United States or everywhere in the world. It's like, wow, like I saw your article. I really love that this is a high priority value for skills can translate into providing or making that happen for you, into providing more value for your customers. And like showing, maybe even like highlighting a project on the cover letter of like where you just mastered accessibility for that project. It's like you could put that up as a government website, and you wouldn't get sued. I think that's a good benchmark for accessibility, because government-based websites have a lot of stipulations and a lot of requirements, and face lawsuits if they're not accessible to everyone they should be accessible to. So, but yeah, I'm just using accessibility as a benchmark. Yeah, Jim, I'm really curious where you got the top list from, though. You got to be careful about top list, but I'd love for you to clarify that if you can. What would you say is an impressive project to have on one's resume? A passion project that you were really excited about. And I talk about this, but like project that you can gain a user base behind, or you built for a business that provides real monetary value and you increase conversions for that business, anything that you can get like data to show that you're improving people's lives and from something that you've built, can be translatable into something that you could build for you. It could be translatable into a company, thinking that you can build products that provide real value to their customers. And that's really what you're trying to answer for them. But ultimately, like passion projects that you spend a lot of time on, that you put features into and you iterate over, and you can gain a user base behind it, like people actually using it. And you're like, oh, I got feedback, and this feature that I initially built sucks. I spent so much time on it, and this was a learning journey or a learning experience for me. And I got to change this. I even simplified it. I thought they wanted this advanced thing, and showing that you could take that feedback and apply it to something people really needed. That's a big bonus. But usually passion projects are impressive projects. I heard in a tech meetup at college that some recruiters will just throw them in the trash. They care more if you meet the requirements of the position. Everyone's going to be different. As a whole, include your cover letters. You're going to get so many people that have strong opinions about that. My solid opinion is you need to include cover letters, especially with a junior position. It's an art to create a good cover letter. I tend to skip them for that very reason. I think you're shooting yourself in the foot with that. I really do. I would also say to focus on building a full project that's deployed with docs, and maybe provide a guide for others to do. I think that's going a bit too far. Love the README, but a guide for like, if it's not an open source project, it seems pointless to provide advice on how to like do PRs with it. Like if it's an open source project, absolutely. But if it's just a solo project that you're going to be managing, I think it's a waste of time, in my opinion. Docs, definitely. It depends on the project too, and it depends on the position. It's a really tricky thing where sometimes you're going to get the advice of like, your resume should change based on the position. If it's like a drastic change, yes. But I would actually, like, you can highlight certain projects for like, if you're playing to front end, back end, or full stack. There's actually value in creating 3 resumes to emphasize that you are a front end developer, back end developer, and full stack developer. If you want to be lazy like me, I just put full stack. But you can kind of tailor your cover letter, or not your cover letter, your resume, to highlighting the right projects that employers are going to care about too. That list was one I created based on students and career karma. Based on students and career karma. Okay. I would, what do you consider like a top coding bootcamp? Is it just like, did you take on career karma? It's just like the rating on career karma. Is that what it was? Or did you prioritize certain aspects of the coding bootcamp? What do you mean? What is full stack? Stack developer? Yeah, full stack developers is someone that works on everyone has different definitions for it, but typically someone that works on the front end and back end of an application. I also feel like showing knowledge of how you would expect others to enhance the code base would show a strong understanding of your app and coding conventions for that project. So it would share your coding conventions. I think something that, I mean, you could do that. I don't think it's going to hurt you. I wonder this is just my opinion. I think I would do it just a little bit differently. I would probably include like a case, not a case study for software engineering specifically, but I would probably include like, this is what a blog is really good for. This is what creating LinkedIn posts are really good for. Because a lot of these conversations can happen if the project is interesting enough in an interview. But really, a lot of employers ask for a passion project, and the real conversation about like conventions and why you do it this way happens in the interview. But if you live stream it and you're talking about it, like that's something I did, and it showed a transparent window into like how I think, that's healthy. If you write a blog post about like how you grew from it or like why you initially built it, what were the initial requirements? What were you trying to solve? And like, what were some of the blockers you faced? Or like even just giving some context about like posting the project on LinkedIn and posting that, like give it a link, maybe a couple screenshots and talking about it. I feel like you can provide that extra context. I just don't know if it's not an open source project, it seems out of place to provide it. Like, where are you going to provide it in the README? Are you going to have a link to separate docs, or how would you? I don't know. If you don't actually want people contributing to it, you shouldn't give people instructions on how to contribute to it. So basically, if it's an open source project, this is a really good idea. If it's not an open source project and you're giving instructions on how to contribute to this project, I don't think that's portraying the project in the way I think it's just weird. I just think it's unnecessary. And I would like, when I saw that, I would almost think like, well, have you brought in any PRs, or like, I might even like, maybe I would test it out, like open up a PR. And if you didn't bring it in or you didn't provide any feedback, do you just leave that PR open? I feel like what you're trying to do just for the purpose of like satisfying an employer and like giving more context, I think you can do it in better ways. I don't know. Those are just my thoughts. Maybe I'm like completely wrong about this. I've never really tested this. So feel free just to completely disagree with me on this one. I'm just trying to think out loud of like how I would perceive that. But anyone else, feel free to disagree. Maybe I'm completely wrong on this one. I went through Career Karma and was given that list of top coding that I was matched with, and several other students rated those good. Okay, so I wouldn't say they're the top coding boot camps. I know they have their own matcher. I don't know how accurate that is. I wanted to test that out. Because I remember talking affiliate links with Career Karma and they were describing it a bit. But one thing, like, I don't know how accurate that matcher is. I haven't tested it out, but I wouldn't say they're like top coding boot camps, if that makes sense. They might just be based on like what you prioritized. So that's why I was asking, like, what did you prioritize to bring them up? So one thing you need to be careful of, I would do this with career karma and Career Karma and Course Report. That's the other website. Get reviews on both of those. Scrap all the 5-star reviews, scrap all the 1-star reviews, and look at the 2 to 4-star reviews. And get a feel for what students are saying, because I think you're going to get more. You're going to get people that aren't drinking the Kool-Aid of the coding bootcamp, which you will get a lot of people like that. And you're also getting people that like aren't being like the 1-star. Very often are people that just like, it could have been as silly as like they got into a fight with an instructor and like hated their experience, because like having a bad experience just with an instructor can sour your entire experience. That's why like I really say instructors make or break a coding bootcamp. So, you get people that just like are very biased. You get this a lot with Lambda. And I guess I'll just talk about it with Lambda. From what I've seen, they did their transition poorly. Now, the interesting thing about Lambda School and the controversy around it is the same mistakes that I've seen Lambda do, I've seen other coding boot camps do, except Lambda, like that got blown way more than any other coding boot camp I've seen. And so you had students that had these bad experiences with the transition. And then from what I've seen, you had like the CEO, he wasn't really humble about it. He wasn't really transparent about it. And so you had these students that had really bad experiences. And then, now they're trapped into this ISA. And now the CEO is trying to deny stuff, just from what I've seen. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And so you get these like students that will literally like got so mad at this that they will create, instead of like spending the time to supplement what they need to supplement and try to get a software engineer position, they'll create entire Twitter accounts for months, just like harassing people that said anything good about Lambda. And so when you get this like hate mob around, or like these hate threads around any coding bootcamp, you need to be skeptical about it, because it doesn't necessarily represent the experience you're going to go through, but it more represents like the individual personalities and how they've handled the discrepancy versus the actual coding bootcamp. Because sometimes you just get hate threads and like all these 1-star reviews on different coding bootcamps just because they're so mad. It's very emotionally biased, and they're not willing to like, every coding bootcamp has its pros and cons. And when you get someone that's just like nothing but 5-star, nothing but 1-star, not willing to like give constructive criticism at all, and not willing to say anything good about the coding bootcamp, you need to be very skeptical of reviews like that. I think Lambda is a really good lesson for that, because I got people harassing my DMs and emails and stuff like that. And they are pissed that I had graduates that said anything positive about it. So you need to be very careful about those 1-star and 5-star reviews, because like there are a lot of coding boot camps that might not even like you might get like a 1-star review that's just trashing their experience, but the coding boot camp might have just like learned from it. And that emotionally biased review doesn't really represent what that coding boot camp is doing right now today. But 2 to 4-star are generally what you can trust a little bit more. It's a long-winded response to that. But yeah, I'd be very careful about like, you could use matchers, but I would almost like want to know like how they pair you. Because I've wondered that with Career Karma, like how do they pair you with the top 3 coding boot camps for you? I need to test that out actually. Yeah, the word top is very subjective. You're right about that. Maybe they do a good job of it. I wonder if they have like this questionnaire of what you prioritize. I have to try it out. It should be noted that Career Karma requires that you leave a review as part of their scholarship program. It's not clear if they require it before or after the course. That's interesting. Their scholarship program. I didn't know they had a scholarship program. I know they do business with coding boot camps, but I didn't know they had a scholarship program. They have a top list where you can buy your way into, I believe. I would definitely stay away from like featured list or top lists like that. I'd be very skeptical of stuff like that. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I thought that's what, when I was looking at some data people showed me, I thought that's what they showed me. Like you get like these sponsored listings and stuff like that, that kind of like are paired with top lists. And I'm not saying specifically with Career Karma, but you get that with a lot of top lists for coding boot camps at so many different websites. I feel like some of the students are paid to write a great review. There's a lot of that going on. Yep. You would be surprised at how often that happens, which is why Career Karma and Course Report they can't prove all of that in many situations. There's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of pressure too. Sometimes coding boot camps will pressure students into leaving reviews. There's a lot of like nasty stuff and deceptive stuff that goes on. Hey, Jesus, that's right. Like in school, some people do great, others don't. That's right. Makes a project stand out on a portfolio. Feel free to review I talked about this in more detail, but just a passion project. Usually that'll make it stand out. Do it, Don. Do what, Q? Do what, Q? They have a scholarship program and a free laptop program. That's interesting. How do you qualify for that? Thanks for coming on my stream. Hey, Tech Rally, how you doing? Did you do a live stream? What'd you do it about? Ugh, I can't talk anymore. I'm losing my voice. I can't talk. Oh, I need to get some food in me. I think that's what I need. I don't think there's like, at this point, I don't think there's a specific website that I would hold them accountable to like having 100% honest reviews. It's really tricky to get that. I think Career Karma and Course Report are pretty good with that. I would look at discussions. I would be careful about some Reddit discussions, but it's really hard to find the right coding bootcamp. So that's why, like, in my opinion, you should just know your priorities of what to look for in a coding bootcamp, and just like allow the reviews to give you insight into kind of what to expect and what you should question the advisors before you actually sign that contract. I think the reviews are really helpful for that. What do you charge for a one-on-one? Just $45. Book a 45-minute session. We hop on and kind of dive into what I really like doing is like diving into blockers, getting a feel for like what, what's kind of driving you. What are some of your blockers that have come up, and help you kind of get through those and solidify a plan going forward. But yeah, it's just, I used to do 1 hour sessions, but I think they're too long. I found that like most people, not all, but I found that most people would, they kind of like fill the time and they would just like come up with questions on the spot. And I'm like, they're not really focused. Very often, like 45 minutes in, we come up with a plan. They're good to go. And then they're like, well, I paid for this extra 15 minutes. So let me just like fill the air with questions. And I think it like it makes them lose focus. So I brought it down to 45 minutes. Do you have a link? Yeah, I can post a link real quick. It should be in the description of my YouTube, but you're on LinkedIn. So let me go ahead and post this. All right. I did give you a nice shout out. I appreciate that. Talked about course support reviews. LOL. Did you? It's pretty cool. What's your overall critique score of Free Code Camp? I don't have a score. Watch my review. I did a review on Free Code Camp. We went over things that I felt like it had and what it was lacking, stuff like that. Definitely check it out. Oh, I guess it doesn't post it on LinkedIn. All right, I'll just put this up. You'll be able to see it there. Copy and paste the link. Oh, I think that's good. We went over so many great things. Yeah, I think I'm all out of things to say. I had like this giant list, but I think we kind of areas. So I think like the main objective I had for this was to be very careful about be very careful about getting into the software engineering industry with this, like, I don't know, just being blind to the realistic expectations of what it's like being a software engineer. Because I think many people will see someone like Chris Sean or other people that like have this dreamy vision of being a software engineer and how it's this amazing transition. And I can tell you there are some people that get into software engineering that, get into companies that completely overwork them and like which puts stress on their family. And sometimes it'll like, it could ruin that entire year for you, or like it can drastically like put a damper, a hole into your career trajectory. And like, there are a lot of bad things that can happen from becoming a software engineer. And I think people need to be more aware of like what to look out for in bad positions. And it's usually bad positions that are tainting people's experiences, but there are a lot of them, and you need to learn how to weed that out. I'll check out your YouTube channel. I've mostly been following you on LinkedIn. Okay, very cool. All right, well, if you haven't already, definitely follow me on YouTube. I don't know if I'm going to, I'll probably keep doing LinkedIn live streams, but I think like YouTube eventually is going to be my main streaming platform, and I'm going to build it up on that. But so one more heads up, I have a podcast episode coming out about like a self-paced program next week. And then the following week, we're going to do a mock interview. So had my friend Dan on, really good guy. He actually interviewed me, and he interviewed someone from our community. And we did a front-end interview. It lasted like an hour and a half. I'm going to post the audio. I just don't think it's going to be as good of an experience. The video is really good. I think you're going to enjoy it. So look out for that in a couple weeks. If you want to see what kind of like it was really realistic, what the front-end interview is like. I think you guys are going to like that. But that's it for me. I'm losing my voice. Keep in mind, we do this every Friday. So if you have questions, feel free to bring them next Friday. But thanks for joining me. It was really great catching up with everyone and chatting. All right. Take care, everyone. Happy coding.